You may be seated. It is fitting for today's pomp and circumstance to fall on the Feast of Pentecost in the Christian calendar, a celebration of the descent of the Holy Spirit, the Paraclete, the Advocate, who transcends human difference and distinction and points us all instead toward one another, allowing us to see one another's true humanity and inner worth in such a way that despite our differences in language, culture, socioeconomic status, or upbringing, we can begin to communicate fully and to work for the common good. As such, one of the readings from the lectionary for today is the first letter to the Corinthians, wherein St. Paul writes, "There are different kinds of spiritual gifts, but the same Spirit. There are different forms of service, but the same Lord. There are different workings, but the same God, who produces all of them in everyone. To each individual, the manifestation of the Spirit is given for some benefit." And so let us pray on this day of days to live out our calling for the benefit of all. God of many names, in whom we trust, you have called us here today, and indeed over our whole lives, and we come before you humbled with gratitude for all that has led us to this moment and for all that lies ahead. We seek strength and fortitude of mind for these new medical doctors as they set forth as healers of the sick. Help them to bring relief to the suffering, peace to the troubled, health to the ill. Help them especially to seek out and care for the poorest in our midst and in those most vulnerable populations in our cities and around the globe. Help them to be good stewards of the trust given to them by their patients, families, and the communities in which they serve, and to be of service for the common good of all. Help them to also realize their limitations and the liberation that comes from planting seeds that will one day grow, of laying foundations that will need further development. After all, we are workers, not master builders, prophets of a future not entirely our own. And so we pray in thanksgiving for our time here on College Hill, for those who have supported us along the way, for this kairotic moment of commencement, and for our futures ahead. Amen.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. I wish all of you could be where I am and see this wonderful gathering. I want to welcome everybody to the 41st commencement exercise of the Warren Alpert Medical School of Brown University. First, I want to thank the families of the loved ones that are here for joining us. Congratulations on what you've done to get your medical student through 4 very, very difficult years. They are on the launching pad of wonderful and fulfilling careers, and you should be very proud of them. But you also should be very proud of yourselves. Without your efforts, they would not be sitting where they are today. I also want to thank... I also want to thank the medical faculty and staff that are here today, including Dean Besdine, who has joined us for the ceremony. The heart of the medical school are the students, and the heart of the medical school are the faculty. And again, without the insight, guidance, mentorship, and wisdom that the faculty have conveyed, we would also not be having this wonderful ceremony. So thank you to the faculty. To the class of 2014, we are immensely proud of you. You have worked hard, and as we've all noticed, you also have played hard. You have done a great job and accomplished wonderful things. You are an immensely wonderful group of people with immense knowledge, immense compassion, and a true commitment to serve in everything that you do, and we are thrilled that you've gotten to this point in your career. You're about to go forward into one of the most wonderful professions that can exist. You're going to be attending to the sick and helping the less fortunate. This is a wonderful calling, and in the course of that, people will come to you for advice, and they will tell you their most intimate secrets. You need to take this responsibility very seriously. You need to never waver in your commitment to improving the lives of your patients, and you need to never waver in your commitment to improving society and the cultures that they come from. Always listen to your patients. They have immense insight, and they also have a very, very important story to tell you. Now, at every commencement, every speaker like myself wants to make a couple points that are take-home messages that will carry with the graduates at least across the street to the reception. So I have 4 points that I want to make. The first point is that we are all here because we have built on the shoulders of the people that preceded us. We many, many times take that for granted, but this year it got pointed out to us vividly at the Alpert Medical School when the two founding deans of the medical school, Stanley Aronson and David Greer, both left us this year. They are immensely important in what exists now in the Alpert Medical School. They have had a huge impact on what we are as a community right now, and I somehow know that they are with us in spirit for today's event. The next point I want to make is that you always need to remember who you are and where you came from. At events like this, I remember my graduation from medical school. I was very excited on that day. My parents obviously were very excited. But I think the most excited person in the family was my grandmother. My grandmother grew up in Greek Macedonia and had no formal education whatsoever. She ended up being a single mother of 2 young boys at a time when the economy was very, very bad and the future was very bleak. She took my uncle and my father to the port city of Patras and convinced a captain of a tramp steamer to take them all to Ellis Island to have a new life. When she got to Ellis Island, she realized that my father in steerage class had developed a rash, and one of the things that was very clear to everybody on the boat was that if they thought you had an infectious disease of any sort that couldn't be taken care of by the medical facilities on Ellis Island, you were sent back to where you came from. My grandmother was not going to let that happen. She took my uncle, sent him through for his physical exam, and he passed with flying colors. She then took my uncle's papers, gave them to my father, put my father under her skirt, sent my uncle through the line a second time, and he got second physical exam with the same result. They then left Ellis Island, went to New York. My grandmother worked in a sweatshop while my father and my uncle went to school, and that's the story. When I came down off the podium with my degree, the first person to meet me was my grandmother. She gave me a big hug, and with tears in her eyes, she looked at me and said, "Jackie?" Yes, she's the only person that calls me Jackie, and she gets away with it. She said, "Jackie, you may be a doctor, but I'm a professor. I'm a professor of life." And you know, she's absolutely right. Without her ingenuity, commitment, and love of her family, I wouldn't be where I am, and I wouldn't have had the opportunities that I have had, and I'm immensely grateful. But each and every one of you have similar stories about similar people in your lives who are committed to you and have made great sacrifices to allow you to be where you are. You need to honor these people by thanking them. But you need to go one step further. You need to honor them by passing this forward to the next generation. The next point that I want to make is that you may think that the work is over. You've had 4 grueling years. We've watched you work about as hard as people can work. And you may think, wow, now it's time to relax a little bit. And I'd say, yeah, but only a little bit. You're about to be interns and you're about to be residents, and you're about to start on a treadmill of scientific, experiential, personal, and interpersonal learning. You are going to have a very full plate for the next period of time in your life. You are going to have an immense number of options. You've got to use this to find your place in life. You've got to use this time to find your passion. You've got to get to a point so that when you come downstairs in the morning and you realize that you're going to do X for 8, 10, or 12 hours, that better put a smile on your face. If that puts a smile on your face, you've used your time in medical school and you've used your time in residency really well, and you've done what you have to do. The last point that I want to make is that I think it's incumbent on every one of us to leave medicine better than we found it. It is our obligation and the obligation of every physician to improve the care that we provide to our patients so that future generations of caregivers will have better treatments than we have today. For many years at events like this, I've thought of a patient I had as an intern named Nick D'Alessandroni. Nick died a very, very difficult death, basically a suffocation death with a disease called idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, where the lung just fibroses away. That event really impacted on me, and actually I took Nick's death as a challenge, and I've spent many decades of my life trying to understand idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis and trying to come up with treatments for this disease. I can tell you that it's been a labor of love, and it's not been just myself. There are many people around the world who have been doing just the same thing. I'm sure, though, that you can understand how we all got on social media and made phone calls to each other about 6 months ago when the Food and Drug Administration, using many of the things that were discovered by the idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis community, licensed the first 2 drugs that actually treat idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. So that is an incumbent issue for all of us. When I first came to Brown, one of the things I was asked by the graduates and others was, what are the main things you want to convey to the students? Let me put my answer this way. We need to provide the absolute best care we can for our patients. We also owe it to future generations to make the modes of care that we use the most efficient that they can possibly be. And we need to work to develop new treatments that ameliorate, and yeah, I will say it right here in front of everybody, prevent or cure diseases that are now uncurable. So I want to end this presentation by challenging each and every one in this room to improve during the course of their careers how we handle at least one disease. Exactly what type of contribution you make will depend on where you find your passion and where your passion takes us. It may take place in the clinic, it may take place in the operating room, it may take place at the bench, and it may take place at a computer terminal. Yes, it may even take place in a doctor's office with a single doctor talking to a patient, listening intently to what the patient is trying to say, and appreciating something from that patient that no other caregiver has been able to appreciate up to that time to figure out what's really going on. Imagine how great the world would be if every Brown student improved how we treat a single disease, and I'm absolutely convinced that you will. Now take it one step further. Imagine where we will be years from now if every medical student made this a tenet of their medical career. So in closing, congratulations to the graduates, the families, the loved ones, the professors, the staff. To the graduates, go forth and do great things. But remember, when you're on life's journey, you will always be part of the Brown Medical School family, and we will always be there for you. Go out and celebrate. You've earned it. Thank you.
It is my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Luba Domingo. the director of the preclinical curriculum at the Warren Alpert Medical School. Luba, as we call her, completed medical school at the University of Wisconsin, internal medicine residency at the University of Pennsylvania, and a Heme-Onc fellowship at Case Western. Brown has been lucky enough to have her serving in a leadership and teaching capacity since 1992, and she was selected by our class as a speaker today. When most of us think about Luba, we think about excellent teaching. Good teaching is the ability to tell a good story, and a good story should both teach and motivate. Luba's carefully developed lectures are disguised as stories. They are staffed by thousands of players, tightly organized teams of macrophages, basophils, and eosinophils. Luba's lectures have plot lines, cliffhangers, and most of the time they have a resolution. And when a hematology lecture resembles an action film, it's much easier to remember the life of a B cell. Luba is a teacher who radiates warmth and enthusiasm, and she speaks an accessible language. Luba can distill a complex coagulation cascade into a digestible narrative for medical students. And as we make this leap from medical students to physicians, we will use Luba's model to create our own stories for our patients. Stories that meet the patient where they are and that motivate change. Stories that paint a future that isn't riddled in pain, infection, or hospitals. Stories like these shape the doctor-patient relationship and encapsulate the true art of medicine. It is my great honor to introduce the beloved Dr. Luba Domingo, a teacher who sees strengths in us that we had not seen in ourselves, and who elevates us to become the teachers, storytellers, doctors, and people we all desire to be.
Thank you, Honora. Good morning, Dean Elias, dignitaries, esteemed faculty and alumni, proud parents, families, and friends, and most importantly, the MD class of 2015. Yes. I'm thrilled and extremely honored to be speaking to you today as you receive your MD degrees. I must admit to some trepidation when first contemplating this great honor. No, I haven't done this before. So I tried to think creatively about why I shouldn't be the one to give this address. There must be some mistake. Alex and Janice, how about retallying those votes? That didn't work. Then I went to Dick Dallas, our director of the Office of Medical Education, but also my mentor, friend, and go-to person, who reassured me that I should indeed give this speech. He said, Luba, don't worry. Do you remember who your commencement speaker was, or what he or she talked about? As you can expect, my answer was, no, of course not. So, on this joyous day that you are allowing me to share with you, armed with the knowledge that what you will remember about today is the great excitement of receiving your MD degrees, surrounded by the warmth and love of your families, friends, and colleagues, I will proceed. I will gather my courage and give you one last talk in the hopes that I can leave you with a few useful thoughts and reflections and stay within my time limits. I remember how much you appreciate that. Recently, we took our younger kids to see a Newport film documentary on extreme sports. The photography and filming of these frankly superhuman athletes in some of the most extraordinary settings in the world was both absolutely stunning and humbling. I can get down an intermediate slope when I'm skiing, but just barely. How can they physically do these things? In this movie, a professional rock climber who's climbed all of his life and has put himself into incredibly terrifying, death-defying situations said that he climbs to pursue the mastery of fear. Ah, I thought, I actually do have something in common with these incredible humans. I am currently, as I give this talk, pursuing the mastery of fear. And Carolyn, I know you'll be doing the same in a few minutes, wherever you are. A few weeks ago, I looked at the MD15 Google Calendar to see how we started out year one together. I was astonished to see a MedEd building opening celebration on the calendar for August 15, 2011. I was awash with memories of moving into the new building and the excitement of taking in your class. I know some of you were a bit anxious about what lay ahead and that you had to master your fears. I had the challenge and joy of teaching you during your preclinical years. You were incredibly inquisitive, always striving to make connections between the different things you were learning, and you challenged me and your faculty members in a professional and caring manner to continue to grow and learn. For this, I am grateful. It's been said that no one learns as much about a subject as one who's forced to teach it. As you graduate now with your Doctor of Medicine degree, think of the word doctor from the Latin docere, to teach. Whether you are taking the time to explain or teach concepts to one of your medical students, a patient or their family members, or a colleague, you will find that you will be challenged to continually deepen your own understanding. The Swiss philosopher and poet Henri Frédéric Amiel said it well. It is by teaching that we teach ourselves, by relating that we observe, by affirming that we examine, by showing that we look, by writing that we think, and by pumping that we draw water into the well. It is possible to whisk into a large lecture hall full of first or second year medical students and to assume that your students are just empty receptacles waiting to be passively filled with knowledge. In reality, not only do you shortchange your students by making these simplistic judgments, but you lose the joy and richness that comes from learning more about people. Let's look at your class. Some of you had a previous career as a basic science researcher, engineer, film or television producer, police officer, firefighter, EMT, entrepreneur, documentary journalism producer, and I know that list is incomplete. We've had extraordinarily talented musicians, vocalists, and dancers in this class. The Bhangra Indian folk dancers in this group are incredible to watch, and we have salsa and African dancers as well. Have you been upstairs on the 3rd floor of the medical school this week? There are some amazing pieces of art by our medical students on display. There I made the discovery that one of you is an incredibly gifted sculptor. Some of you are amazing cooks, and some of you just aspire to be. Some of you are athletes and have completed marathons. Some of you have been involved in every sport I can think of, including water polo. If you want to know anything about the Olympic sport of curling, you'll find that you have a colleague who can help you out. And you probably knew this, but I didn't until recently. At least one of you is particularly talented at hula hooping. If you haven't figured this out by now, attending events like the Biomed concert and the Low Yield shows gives us small windows into your lives. It is both fun and inspiring. You have volunteered your time in refugee clinics, working with underserved populations, locally in the Rhode Island Free Clinic and in the Clinica Esperanza, and literally all over the globe. As medical students, you've developed and run preclinical electives, including topics as diverse as healthcare for the underserved, moms, medical students outreach for mothers-to-be, gender and sexuality in healthcare, medical Chinese and Spanish, and many of you have become certified as qualified professional test counselors. These accomplishments and interests are truly impressive and humbling. You are not just medical students who are about to become physicians, and your patients are not just patients. Your patients have stories. They too are multidimensional. Take a few extra minutes to learn something more about your patients and their families. They are fathers and mothers, significant others, sons and daughters, sisters and brothers, with a myriad of different careers, interests, passions, and challenges. It can be hard to realize how multi-layered, dense, and complicated the medical system can appear for our patients to navigate. Tom Brokaw, who was diagnosed at age 73 with multiple myeloma, said this: "Most patients enter a doctor's office or hospital as if it were a Mayan temple, representing an ancient and mysterious culture with no language in common with the visitor." No matter how busy or overwhelmed you are, don't isolate yourselves during difficult times. Recognize that it's the connections that we have to the people who touch our lives that can buoy us through these hard times, allowing us to embrace challenges. I remember a gentleman I took care of many years ago who had very advanced lung cancer. He was only in his late 50s, and he came in each time with his wife. He would always put a good spin on how he was feeling. His wife would listen patiently, and then she would pitch in with some additional information about how he was really doing. He knew she would do that for him. He had the most incredible attitude and a great deal of faith. Our team knew we had exhausted our therapeutic options, and I was struggling with how to relay this information to him and to his wife. He smiled at me and told me that he had had a great life and that God would take care of him, not to worry. I don't think I'll ever forget that. He had a gratefulness for life and a willingness to face the unknown that stunned me. Life's lessons can come at times in surprising ways that are totally unexpected. The field of medicine is changing so rapidly. In fact, our lives are. Google autonomous self-driven cars are out on the road being tested. They've already driven a total of 1.7 million miles on the roads. My brother's comment about this was, we are living in a science fiction future. I have to mention this, though. Did you see the post entitled, "Google Blames Humans for Accidents Involving its Self-Driving Cars"? Are you kidding? The Google autonomous cars blaming us? The medical field is undergoing rapid transformation as well, as you're acutely aware. Some of you may have recently read that Watson, the supercomputer that beat human Jeopardy champions in 2011, will soon be in use at several US cancer institutes. By analyzing the DNA fingerprints of various tumors in minutes rather than in weeks, Watson will be used to identify quote-unquote actionable cancer-causing mutations to guide decisions about targeted therapies. While all of these changes are exciting, they will undoubtedly dramatically impact the way medicine is practiced in the future. While Watson can process immense amounts of information much more quickly than we, as humans, can, it will never replace the human interaction. It is a great honor and privilege to work closely with people and share in their lives. You will find that if you are open to it and can spend the extra few minutes that this requires, there's a tremendous amount to be learned from your patients who will trust you with their very private aspects of their lives and entrust you with their care. I still receive a Christmas card every year from the mother of one of the patients I took care of 20 years ago, a young man in his early 20s with a wonderful sense of humor who died of acute leukemia. The strength of the personal relationship is phenomenal. I have one last reflection to leave you with, and I thought I might relay it briefly by telling you a little bit about myself. You already heard I grew up in Wisconsin, as you know, one of the flyover states. Yes, at the root deep down, I am a Midwesterner. I received my MD degree, as you heard, from the University of Wisconsin Medical School in Madison. On match day, I learned that I got my third choice, internal medicine at the University of Pennsylvania. I moved there in June, I won't tell you the year, to begin my internship, and I knew no one. It was one of those opportunities to pursue the mastery of fear. On my very first day of internship, I met another young intern by the name of Timothy Flanagan. I think you know him? Where's Tim? He graduated from Cornell and also matched at Penn at his third residency choice. Now let me ask you, how likely is that? If the computer hadn't matched us both to Penn from different parts of the country, it's unlikely we would have ever met. And now, of course, you know the end of the story. We've both been at Brown for a long time. We've been married 28 years, have 5 children, and have both loved working with medical students. So, while you're busy mastering your fears, be open to the unexpected. Back to why I'm sharing our story. Some of you might worry about how to find some balance in pursuing your passions or perhaps in having a family. I've been fortunate enough to work in many different areas in medicine, clinical medicine, basic science research, and in medical education at different times in my career. My words of advice would be that the field of medicine is broad and wide, full of opportunities. Jump, seize the opportunities when they come, and be flexible. You never know what's ahead of you. If you had told me, back when I was sitting in your very seat as a graduating medical student in Wisconsin, that I would have worked as an attending physician on a bone marrow transplant unit, done basic science research on gene transfer of a DNA repair enzyme, published in Science, and had moved on to an extraordinarily fulfilling job as a medical educator who gets to deal with inspirational and brilliant students, I would never have believed it. And if you had told me that I would have 5 children, 4 of whom were boys, I honestly would not have believed that either. A few years ago, a neighbor and good friend of mine came over to our house with a sign she bought for me. She stood on a chair, and she mounted it directly onto my kitchen wall without asking me. It read, "Boy, noun, a noise with dirt on it." I was afraid it might be insulting to my boys, but no, they love that sign. It's still up in my kitchen. I've learned a lot, including accepting the uncontrollable, enjoying the unexpected, and rolling with the punches. In August, I remember Tim and I were at home talking about the Ebola situation in Liberia, the period of rioting unrest, the secret late-night burials of Ebola victims by family members, and the quarantine of the township of West Point in Monrovia that trapped tens of thousands of residents inside. The scary white hazmat, Ebola suits. One morning, Tim said, "Luba, I've been thinking about the situation in Liberia." I answered, "Yes, I know." He said, "I am thinking that I might need to go to Liberia for 2 months to help out." I answered, "Yes, I know. I guess 28 years of marriage will do that for you." Tim left for Liberia on August 30th and spent 2 months there, essentially teaching, training the trainers, and working with local healthcare workers all over the country. He was there during the height of the epidemic and, of course, during the media frenzy that was happening here. Yes, you guessed it, yet another opportunity for me at the time to master my fears. On May 9th, Liberia was declared Ebola-free, but at the time, mastering fear was no small feat. Marcel Proust wrote, "We don't receive wisdom, we discover it for ourselves after a journey that no one can take for us or spare us." I'm deeply grateful that I've been given the extraordinary opportunity to get to know you as first-year medical students and then to watch you learn, grow, and blossom into the very fine physicians you've become. I'm very honored to have been a part of your lives. If over the next few years you ever find yourselves having trouble mastering your fears, think of me. If I can do it, so can you. Thank you.
Good morning. I am Sarah Rappaport, and it is my distinct pleasure to introduce to you my dear friend and classmate, Carolyn Lupins, our class's commencement speaker. Carolyn grew up in the backcountry of Colorado, where she learned to hunt, fish, ski, and climb mountains. In fact, Carolyn's first anatomy lesson took place 14 years ago when she field-dressed an elk, which I recently learned is a hunting term for gutting the elk. But Carolyn was also a classic scholar in college, and ever the maximalist, she was her class valedictorian. True to type, this spring, Carolyn was awarded the Rhode Island chapter of the American College of Surgeons Prize, an award given to the graduating medical student who has demonstrated service and dedication to the surgical community of Rhode Island. In just a few weeks, Carolyn will begin training as a general surgery resident at the University of Utah in Salt Lake City. Carolyn plans to become a trauma surgeon, bringing her special brand of skilled and focused medical care to resource-poor populations, both here and abroad. The title of Carolyn's speech this morning is the Anti-Checklist Manifesto. I introduce to you my friend and colleague, Carolyn Lupins.
Thank you, Sarah, for that very kind introduction. I am going to have to master a bit of fear standing up here, but I am deeply honored to have been chosen by my peers and soon-to-be colleagues to speak on their behalf today. Interestingly, I was also chosen as graduation speaker by my high school class, but was vetoed by the headmaster in favor of someone a touch more predictable. Which, though disappointing, was not all that surprising, as I did at one point have the most demerits in the history of the school. Avery Clark can corroborate this story. We went to high school together. But it's a nicely symmetrical story to know that I've grown enough and my environment has changed enough that I can and have been trusted to stand here at the podium today. So this is my first opportunity to give a speech in this context where I'm supposed to say something inspiring, enlightening, maybe impart some words of wisdom, and send you all out into the great perhaps refreshed and eager to face your futures. I'm just narcissistic enough that I'll endeavor to do something like that, but I'd also like to bring some levity to the occasion. Today marks a huge milestone in our lives. Today is the day we become doctors. We even take an oath. And though I believe in the transformative power of rituals, I'd like to make an argument for why today is the least important day of medical school. There are two very different sets of milestones that we progress through in our time here. The first being the endless series of hoops we're made to jump through, many mediated by the profiteering USMLE, and the second being the subtle daily achievements, the stepping stones that pave the path we travel between the first day of medical school and today, when we get the MD epithet. And when I say path, I mean gauntlet. Med school is like Sparta, but worse, because the intermittent coddling is very confusing. It would be much easier if we just got turned out into the wilderness and were told to come back in 4 years for our degrees if we were still alive. It would also be much less expensive. But the hard part of medical school isn't learning the science or learning how to interview and examine a patient. The hard part is learning all that while figuring out how you're supposed to park in the Coro garage when the shuttle starts running 30 minutes after you're supposed to be at work. It's figuring out how to be completely nomadic and carry everything you might need all day on your person because you don't have a place to store anything in the hospital, and you certainly can't go back to your car because it's 30 minutes away by shuttle. The hard part is subsisting entirely on Cliff Bars because you can't afford to buy lunch, and you certainly can't have anywhere to keep the lunch you so optimistically packed yourself. The hard part is showing up at the hospital at 4 in the morning on your birthday because the OBGYN residents decided to come in early, and you're supposed to pre-round, have your notes written even earlier so they can read them and give you feedback, which they won't, never have, and never will do. But the good part is when your fellow classmate buys you a birthday cup of coffee at 5 in the morning. Thank you, Sam Yang. You're a wonderful human being. The hard part of med school is always being a little bit, and usually more than a little bit, bad at your job because you start a new one every 6 weeks. The hard part is standing outside a door that says authorized personnel only and having no idea if that means you. It's having been instructed by someone important to deliver a time-sensitive message to someone else important on the other side of that door and being pretty sure you don't have the right protective equipment on. You don't need lead. You didn't want to have kids anyway, right? The hard part of med school is sleeping on an air mattress in a friend's living room on an away rotation, waking up well before dawn and biking through the deserted streets of South Chicago or Seattle or New Orleans or New York or LA to get to the hospital and working until well after dark, all while paying for the privilege to beg to be considered for a job that will be at least as hard. Navigating this endless catch-22 of medical school and figuring out how to learn something at the same time is the real feat. That's the fire that forged us into the tougher stuff we're made of now. Most of us have been actively working towards this day for at least 5 years, and some of us for much longer. And there's this whole other systematic half of the gauntlet we've had to contend with to make it here today. Though our ability to jump through these hoops might have very little to do with the quality of doctor we can expect to become, it is what determines whether or not we are allowed to become doctors at all. And in order to survive, it's very easy to turn your life into a kind of checklist. If only I can get an A in Orgo. If only I can ace the MCAT. If only I can get into medical school. If only I can nail step 1. If only I can honor my sub-I. If only I can get the right away rotations. If only I can get enough interviews. If only I can match at my number 1. If only, if only, if only, then my real life can begin and I can relax. But honestly, were any of these steps deal breakers in the way we thought they'd be? No, they weren't. And they won't be, because it definitely continues. I just have to make it through intern year. I just have to get the right fellowship. I just have to publish and publish and publish. I just have to become clerkship director, program director, chairman. It is endless. It is infinite. It is Zeno's paradox. You'll never get anywhere if you turn your life into a checklist and pretend it has an intelligible endpoint. We learn a lot about checklists in medicine. We use them a lot. They are excellent for increasing efficiency and reducing errors in processes that have objectively correct outcomes. But life does not work that way. There is no objectively correct outcome. So don't live your life fulfilling the criteria on someone else's list. You have to define those terms for yourself if you want any chance at happiness. Don't default into your future. There's probably at least one, and if I'm being honest, many more that got to med school that way. For whatever reason, becoming a doctor seemed like the path of least resistance that led to a future that was easily rationalized and seemed beyond reproach. But hopefully all of you stayed because you found something substantial and compelling here. What that is will be different for everyone, and you get to define your own values. You get to decide what will make your life meaningful and why. But that privilege is also a burden. It's much easier to define yourself by those never-ending, externally validated check marks than by what you make of yourself in the margins and the blank spaces between the boxes. I'd like to offer you a framework in which you can consider these choices. Many of you know that I studied philosophy before I decided to become a doctor. And those of you that know me well will have heard me talk about Achilles before, frequently and at great length. But bear with me, because I really do think that there's wisdom to be found in these ancient texts, and I think we are fundamentally the same as the heroes in these epic tales. For those of you who don't know or have forgotten the story of Achilles, let me briefly summarize. Achilles was a mercenary, acknowledged by all as the greatest warrior of his time, who had no vested interest in the Trojan War beyond his own pursuit of glory. His mother was a goddess who could see the future, and her prophecy gave Achilles a choice: go to war, die heroically, and be remembered forever, or stay home, live, and live happily ever after in anonymity. Achilles chose to go to war. He died there, and we remember him still. The prophecy is fulfilled. But later in the Odyssey, Odysseus encounters Achilles in the underworld, and he recants, stating he would rather be a slave on earth than the king of hell. I don't pretend to know which of these choices is better or right, death and infamy or life and anonymity, but I do think that these are the choices we are all always making. Hyperbolized, perhaps, we could less dramatically call this dichotomy work-life balance. But still, we can choose to sacrifice everything else to achieve as much as possible or favor the contentment found in the content of daily life. Unlike Achilles, our choice doesn't have to be binary. It doesn't have to be either or exclusively, at least I fervently hope not. But nonetheless, how we balance these priorities is a choice we'll have to make every day. I do think our lives are this epic. You should all consider yourselves as the hero of your own life story. I exhort you all to take yourselves that seriously. And now, moving away from Homer, I'd like to remind you of the words of our very insightful and articulate classmate, John Williams, who could just as easily have been standing up here today offering wisdom. Let's remember that inertia and defense of the status quo is tantamount to a concession that the world today is largely a product of happenstance, and the prospects it offers are as good as it gets. Do not submit to the inertia. Do not accept the status quo. Let's make a pact today to do the work, to choose deliberately, to be excellent, to design our own happily ever after and live up to our own expectations and no one else's. Congratulations, MD class of 2015.
Hi, everyone. The plaque I'm about to dedicate today was meant for a person that we called a friend and a classmate, Laura Kabuka. The poem I am about to read is a piece she wrote, and I think it's fitting because it doesn't only reflect how her gracious attitude and her positive outlook, but it's a piece that we too might be able to find meaning in, or might be able to see the beauty of what she saw in life. When you think about life, what do you think of? I think of how I've been blessed beyond my wildest imagination. I am reminded of Matthew 6:26. Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not that much more valuable than they are? I have been blessed with a family that has loved me with such intensity and devotion that I am in awe. I've been blessed with friends who see my faults, yet concentrate on my strengths. Life has its fair share of misery, and no one is exempt from this suffering. Yet in the depths of despair, God gives the strength to color the darkest of canvases white. When I think of God, when I think of life, I think of God. When I think of life, I think of beauty, devotion, joy, music, and dance. When I think of life, I think of family and friends. When I think of life, I know I have been blessed. Thank you.
Graduates, please stand. It is traditional that those about to enter the profession of medicine take an oath before their peers, their faculty, and their families, pledging themselves to certain ethical principles of commitment and professional behavior. This particular oath was written by the MD class of 1975 and has been used by each succeeding class. Please repeat after me. Now being admitted to the high calling of the physician, I solemnly pledge to dedicate my life to the care of the sick, the promotion of health, and the service of humanity. In the spirit of those who have inspired and taught me, I will seek constantly to grow in knowledge, understanding, and skill. And will work with my colleagues to promote all that is worthy in the ancient and honorable profession of medicine. The health and dignity of my patient will ever be my first concern. I will hold in confidence all that my patient relates to me. I will not permit consideration of race, gender, sexual orientation, religion, nationality, or social standing to come between me and my duty to anyone in need of my service. This pledge I make freely and upon my honor. Please be seated.
Sophie E. Honorandi, homines quos ad gradum magistri aduneos comperimus, vobis presentamos et eos ad hunc gradum promovere liciat rogamos. Candidati ad gradum magistri ascendat. Actoritate mihi commisi, vos ad gradum magistri admitto, omniaque iura a privilegia ad hunc gradum pertinentia vobis concedo, quare in testimonium haec diplomata vobis solemniter trado.
Sir, I have the honor to present the recipient of the degree of Master of Public Health of Brown University, Deidria Jackson.
Sedete igitur ut probe integreque in a monumentum reti publicae eum Dei honorem ut decet eos hoc gradu honoratos vos gratus. Sedete magistri. Soci honorandi homines quos ad gradum doctoris medicinae adoneos comparamos, vobis presentamos et eos ad hunc gradum promovere liciat rogamos. Candidati ad gradum doctoris medicinae ascendat. Auctoritati mihi commissa vos ad gradum doctoris medicinae admitto. Omniaque iura a privilegia ad hunc gradum pertinentia vobis concedo, quare in testimonium haec diplomata vobis solemniter trato.
Sir, I have the honor to present the recipients of the degree of Doctor of Medicine of Brown University. Nigar Ahmedli. Erica Alexander. Veronica Alexander. Tariq Ali. Andre Anderson. Grayson Armstrong. Gregory Barnett.
Congratulations.
Catherine Berger.
Congratulations.
Honora Burnett.
Congratulations.
John Butler, Jr.
Congratulations.
Keith Butts.
Congratulations.
Nicholas Canello.
Congratulations.
Yi Chow.
Congratulations.
Ivy Chang.
Congratulations.
Gina Chen.
Congratulations.
Daniel Cho.
Congratulations.
Zanera Chowdhury.
Congratulations.
Grace Chow.
Congratulations.
Alice Trung.
Congratulations.
Wei Hong Chung.
Congratulations.
Avery Clark.
Congratulations.
Caitlin Cohen.
Congratulations.
Robert Cook.
Congratulations.
Justine Cormier. Crystal Rose Cuellar.
Congratulations.
Amy Cuneo.
Congratulations.
Rahul Dulal.
Congratulations.
Ella Damiano.
Congratulations.
Andre Dev.
Congratulations.
Gregory Eli.
Congratulations.
Diana Escobar.
Congratulations.
Angela Esquibel.
Congratulations.
Brendan Esquibel.
Congratulations.
Justina Gamache.
Congratulations.
Rafael Gonzalez.
Congratulations.
Zachary Grable.
Congratulations.
Alma Guerrero.
Congratulations.
Robert Heinel.
Congratulations.
Ryan Heaney.
Congratulations.
Ijoma Iko.
Congratulations.
Deidria Jackson.
Congratulations. Nicely done.
Hannah Janeway.
Congratulations.
Helen Johnson.
Congratulations.
Allison Kay.
Congratulations.
Amrin Kandor.
Congratulations.
Tendo Karande.
Congratulations.
Calvin Lambert Jr.
Congratulations.
Amy Leverton.
Congratulations.
Emily Lee.
Congratulations.
Kevin Liu.
Congratulations.
Joy Liu.
Congratulations.
Carolyn Lupins.
Congratulations. Nice job on your talk.
Kelly McDonald.
Congratulations.
Courtney Manino.
Congratulations.
Shannon Marrero.
Congratulations.
Elizabeth Marshall.
Congratulations.
Tracy Martin.
Congratulations.
Alexander Mayer.
Congratulations.
Madeline McKeever.
Congratulations.
Shakir McLean.
Congratulations.
May Min.
Congratulations.
Aaron Mohan.
Congratulations.
Suresh Mohan.
Congratulations.
Patrick Mulvaney.
Congratulations.
Nicholas Nisikis.
Congratulations.
Lindsay Negretti.
Congratulations.
Jerry Nanabu.
Congratulations.
Catherine Penizan.
Congratulations.
Christina Panton.
Congratulations.
Hannah Park.
Congratulations.
Isha Parulkar.
Congratulations.
Bo Peng.
Congratulations.
Aiden Porter.
Congratulations.
Reshma Ramachandran.
Congratulations.
Shankar Ramaswamy.
Congratulations.
Sarah Rappaport.
Congratulations. Nice job on your part.
Julianne Reardon.
Congratulations.
Satyajit Reddy.
Congratulations.
Daniel Resnick Alt.
Congratulations.
Rachel Rome.
Congratulations.
Rohit Sangal.
Congratulations.
Tara Schetzel Hill.
Congratulations.
Sarah Schlotterbeck.
Congratulations.
Joseph Schmidhofer.
Congratulations.
Matthew Schweed.
Congratulations.
Joanna Sharpless.
Congratulations.
Jacqueline Marie Silva.
Congratulations.
Nathan Sison.
Congratulations.
Corey Spiro.
Congratulations.
Taylor Staten.
Congratulations.
Bianca Stephanie.
Congratulations.
Sarah Swanson.
Congratulations.
Jameel Taylor.
Congratulations.
Gretel Torero. Jonathan Thorndike.
Congratulations.
Olivier Van Hoot.
Congratulations.
Kerry Vega.
Congratulations.
Jason Wade.
Congratulations.
Joanne Wang.
Congratulations.
Claire Williams.
Congratulations.
John Williams.
Congratulations.
Edgar Woznica.
Congratulations.
Michael Schoon.
Congratulations.
And Samuel Yang.
Do you want to have somebody say that?
Sir, I wish to report that 2 students have completed their degree requirements and have permission to receive their degree in absentia, Ted Apstein and David Statt.
Videte igitur ut probe inter Grecque in emolumentum rei publicae eum Dei honorum ut decet eos hunc gradum honoratos vos geratus sedete doctores medicinae. Socii honorandi hominis quos ad gradum philosophia doctores et uneos comperimus vobis presentamos et eos ad hunc gradum promovere liciat rogamos. Candidati ad gradum philosophia doctoris ascendat. Actoritati mihi commissa vos ad gradum philosophia doctoris admitto omniaque jura a privilegia ad hunc gradum pertinentia vobis concedo. Quare in testimonium haec diplomata vobis solemniter trado.
Sir, I have the honor to present the recipients of the degree of Doctor of Philosophy of Brown University. Daniel Cho. Wei-Hong Chung.
Videte igitur ut probe inter Grecque in emolumentum rei publicae eum Dei honorum ut decet eos hoc grado honoratos vos geratus sedete doctores in philosophia.
Dr. Paul George. Today, the graduating class of 2015 has chosen to honor you with the highest award that we can bestow upon any mentor, teacher, or physician here at the Warren Alpert Medical School of Brown University, the Senior Citation. The choice was an easy one for us to make. In fact, previous classes have found this choice to be easy as well. Indeed, this is the 3rd year in a row that you'll be receiving this award. Either you're incredibly kind-hearted and selfless, a dedicated teacher, and a true family man, or you're getting really, really good at deceiving all of us. In all seriousness, as our friend and mentor, your enthusiasm for our personal passions drives us to achieve more monumental goals than we could have ever dreamed of for ourselves. Your ability to respond to emails at all hours of the night has left us wondering whether or not you sleep at all. Your constant devotion to our growth as physicians and to our well-being as students is truly a testament to how thoughtful and compassionate you are in all encounters. As our role model, you have shown us through example that it is truly possible to find a balance between compassionate care, empathy, and the science of medicine. Your vivacious energy, your effortless mastery of clinical medicine, and your passion for teaching has left our graduating class striving to live up to the larger-than-life example that you've set for us. As our attending, you personify the care that we would want for our own family members in this room. Your characteristic, tender-hearted approach to each and every patient will be the class of 2015's standard of care as we enter the medical profession. So on this day, the 24th of May, 2015, Brown University's medical school graduates 106 physicians into the world. And in fact, it just did so. Each and every one of us has a strong and special bond to you, Dr. George. This senior citation is a declaration of our sincere and permanent gratitude for your mentorship, your inspiration, but most of all, your friendship. Thank you, Dr. George.
זה היום עשה אדוני נגילה ונשמחה בו. The psalmist sings, "This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it." As we've heard, today is the holiday of Pentecost, and for the Jewish people, today is Shavuot, a day on which these words from Psalms are actually recited as part of Hallel. This morning, verses from Psalms, verses of praise. Shavuot is the day which marks the arrival of redeemed Israelite slaves at the moment of revelation and receipt of Torah at Mount Sinai, after indeed an arduous trek through the wilderness. So while today is a day of rejoicing, it's also a day of noting just how far we've come. To get through the wilderness, or the gauntlet, of exams and labs and internships and away rotations through which you've just passed, you've needed to have faith in yourselves, faith in your teachers and advisors, and faith in one another. Faith is a funny word, also sometimes called hope. Dr. and founding dean Stanley Aronson of blessed memory took up the subject of hope in his book, Tapestry of Medicine. He writes, "In the absence of sure knowledge, there's always hope. Hope is an indispensable element in the zest of living, and hope remains the state motto of Rhode Island." Just as the Jewish calendar and community today rejoices in the receipt of Torah, the Brown calendar and community celebrates the tremendous wisdom you have all received. Yet as the children of Israel had, just as the children of Israel had another 40 years of wilderness to endure after that revelatory experience on Sinai, so too will your careers as doctors have peaks and valleys. Be like Dean Elias said, perhaps a treadmill. It will require of you steadfast faith in yourselves, your colleagues, and the rightness of your path. It will require that you hang on to hope even after leaving this state and this school in which hope is the motto. The prayer with which I'll close and with which we'll close is the very first official prayer in the Bible, and I think it's no coincidence that it comes in the Torah reading for next week, just as the Israelites are wading more deeply into the wilderness. This blessing is designed to get them through their winding wanderings, and I pray that it will send you forth with the strength you need for your own remarkable journeys from here. So I'm going to need everyone's help, because this blessing is called the priestly benediction, And the priests, it's actually where Mr. Spock got this from. The priests really used to go like this, and the idea was that they were emitting blessings through the lattice work, as it were, of their fingers. And the idea is really that, yes, God bestows blessing, but we bestow blessings on each other. We are a vehicle for blessing from the world, from the divine, however you understand it. We are vehicles for this blessing on each other. So, as I recite this blessing, and I will raise my hand, I won't necessarily go like this, and you don't have to either, but I invite you, all of you here who have such loving and penetrating blessings, some of which you yodeled, some of which you yelled, to please, perhaps silently, but you can also say them out loud if you want, as you respond amen to these blessings, also be sending your own blessings to these amazing healers who I ask to please stand. So I'll recite the blessing in Hebrew and in English. I invite you to say amen after either or both, and really join me in blessing these doctors. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. May you be blessed and protected. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka. May divine light shine upon you and grant you grace. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May God's countenance be lifted always towards you and bring you peace. Amen.